Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome back to Imagination Station, a place that allows you to let your imagination soar beyond reality. I am your favorite author and host, Lisa Walker McCrae, bringing you this story time from the pages of my novel, A Peculiar Kind of Love. Remember, you guys, this video is for entertainment purposes only. First things first, all praises to the Most High Yah, and a beautiful round of applause for those that are selling this thing with me. Much love from this way. With that being said, let's take a dive into those imaginations and turn some pages. Theodore, set the stage. Okay, quick recap, love bugs, to get those imaginations stimulated real fast. If y'all remember, we left Drew and her father Carl at Tammy's on a lunch date. Drew was overwhelmed once again with her job and to add her wedding preparations, in which her job was causing frictions between the two. Drew just didn't have enough time in a day to complete everything needed to be completed. Carl gave her some fatherly advice to start her own business. If she was going to be working her butt off like that, she should be doing it for herself. The advice was sincere. So was the conversation the father and daughter were having about Drew's mother. Drew could clearly see Carl had some unresolved feelings for Joy. Anyway, the trip down memory lane narrated by her father was exciting and informative for Drew. Carl sharing his truths and memories of Joy was much needed and welcome. Drew was excited to finally have some idea of who Joy was in real life and not this character she'd created in her head. And I must say, Carl was doing a pretty good job with the information given. It had Drew sitting on the edge of her seat wanting to know more. And just like Drew, so do we. Especially the question Joy asked when getting into Carl's car. Yes, darlings, we have a need to know, and we will find out right now. The music played overhead. The lunch crowd rushed in and out of Tammy's, but all was muted. The only thing Drew wanted to hear was the question her mother asked when getting into Carl's car. Carl held Drew's stare. Anticipation grew. So, what did Joy ask you when she got into your car? Drew asked, with a need to know. Carl blushed. Your mother asked me, why did I sit in the corner the entire night staring at her instead of asking her to dance? Drew laughed at his embarrassment. Carl told her it was so embarrassing he'd made it that obvious he was interested. Drew was tuned in. So, what did you say? Carl laughed as he did that night, trying to avoid Joy's question that she insisted he'd answer, just as Drew did at that moment. Carl told Drew he didn't have an answer, at least one that didn't make him seem like a scared little boy. Drew, the only thing I could do was be honest with your mother. So, I told her I didn't think a woman as beautiful as her would take me serious or be interested in me. Drew didn't understand why Carl felt that way. For her, he was a catch, but she kept that to herself because she needed him to stay the course and tell more. So, Drew listened and Carl went on. He told her after he explained to Joy his hesitation, she laughed at him so hard it made him feel even dumber. Are you kidding me? Was your mother's reply, Carl enlightened. Then he told Drew Joy threw him for a loop when she admitted to being left at the bus stop on purpose to see if he would be the gentleman she thought he was. Drew held up her hand, pausing Carl's words. Wait a minute. You're telling me Joy gets left at the bus stop on purpose? With excitement, Carl responded with a yeah, she was spontaneous like that. Carl then went on to inform Drew after that night him and Joy were inseparable. "Your mother was a driven force, Drew." Carl looked into her eyes. "You are your mother's daughter." Drew didn't know how to feel about Carl's statement. She rested her back on the chair and wandered in deep thought. Carl took a bite of his sandwich. He could see Drew needed a moment. She wondered just how much she was like her mother. Drew didn't have enough to compare. Silence tried to intrude, so Carl quickly wiped his mouth, then spoke. "Your mother wanted to dance, but your grandparents were against it. Joy couldn't stand the way that they tried to rule her life. She always talked about leaving, but I never took her serious." Carl went on to tell Drew the last time he saw Joy, she was upset, almost disturbed, that he tried to comfort her, but she rejected him. Carl shook his head, letting out a sigh. Disappointment painted his face. "I thought your mother had just had another falling out with her parents, like always. So I left her to calm down, like I always did." Carl took Drew's hand. "Sweetheart, if I knew your mother was pregnant, there is no way I would have left her alone that night. I loved Joy." Drew's heart was filled with compassion. "It must have been hard," she replied with comfort, handing Carl an understanding smile. Carl enlightened. He'd went back the next day to check on Joy, but her roommate informed she'd packed up all her things that night and left. "Drew, then I went to your grandparents' house to find her, but they slammed the door in my face. They always treated me like crap. The Rivers were always trying to convince Joy I wasn't good enough for her." Drew shook her head, now questioning her grandparents. "These people are a real piece of work," she said to self. Carl went on to tell Drew after all that hell, that's when he decided to go into the military, where he spent the next 4 years. Carl let out a sigh. "I was months from completing my 4th year when Sheila called and told me that you had been abandoned at some pier in Texas. I didn't even know you were mine." Drew started to feel uneasy. It was the way her mother just left her without knowing if she was okay. It was the fact her mother took care of her 4 years and decided she didn't want to do it anymore. Drew asked, "How did Sheila know I was your daughter?" Carl told Drew he'd taken Joy home a few times, and he guessed from the photo she left in the purse, Sheila put 2 and 2 together. Drew thought back to that picture she'd found in Sheila's closet. That had to be Joy, she thought to herself. Looking over at Carl, Drew was grateful for the share, but now she despised her mother even more. Drew knew she had to let the pain go in order to move on, but this she could not do. She didn't understand Joy's actions enough to do so. Drew took a bite of her sandwich. There was no way a journal could hold all the questions she had for her mother. However, the day went on. Drew worked through the rest of it, storing questions in her heart for Joy if she ever got the chance to have a sit down like she did with Carl. The workday was now over. Drew was scrolling downtown. After Carl's lunch confession, she needed to drop in on Dean for a little bit of therapy. The bell above the door announced Drew's presence. She noticed Dean was checking out a customer, so Drew shopped around until she was done. No problem. Drew saw that Dean had a new shipment of merchandise in, so this made the drop-in well worth it. "Thank you, Mrs. Fancy. Please come again." Dean gave the customer a smile, then greeted Drew. "Hey, lady, how are you?" The ladies embraced one another. Drew replied with a gloomy fine. Dean quickly analyzed Drew. She became concerned when noticing this wasn't the lively soul she usually encountered. A dime for what's on your mind, Dean asked, at the same time taking a dime from the pink bowl that sat next to the register, handing it to Drew. Drew took the dime. Looking down at it, she asked Self, had Jay let Dean in on their secret to spill the beans? If so, that would have to wait for now, because right now she needed a female's perspective on the conversation her and Carl had at lunch. Which was more important than a dime? Drew took the dime and placed it on her forehead. Both women laughed at the silliness. Dean held up an index finger as to pause the moment. She then hurried over to the door and flipped the open sign to close. Afterwards, she took Drew over to the lounge area. The lounge area was designed for stressed out husbands guilted or dragged into the boutique by their wives on a shopping trip. Although very little men ever came into the boutique, it was still a nice place to relax while shopping. Taking a seat on the green ottoman, Dean allowed Drew to gather her thoughts. Drew let out a sigh. Then she spoke. She told Dean her life story from the womb to adulthood. Drew literally summed up 29 years in less than 20 minutes. Dean was honored and welcomed the ventilation. This was the first time Drew had completely opened herself up. Her story was amazing to Dean. In that moment, she drew strength from Drew. Drew lowered her head in disappointment. To be honest, I can forgive Carl because he didn't even know my mother was pregnant. But Joy, I hate her even more. How could she be so cruel to Carl and not tell him she was pregnant? Drew asked and stated. Dean eyed Drew. The woman that sat before her was all she wanted to be. Dean spoke. Your story is fascinating. Drew was confused. It wasn't a response she wanted, but she waited patiently for Dean to explain. Your story is impressive to me, Drew, because you don't look anything like what you've been through. I mean, God has really favored you. Drew nodded her head in agreement. Dean gave Drew a gentle smile, humbly stating, the road before you holds more purpose than the road behind you. Don't worry about the things you can't change. There was a processing silence between the two. Drew could appreciate Dean's words. She was absolutely right. Her heart desires were on the road before her, and she didn't need to look back at the things Joy had done. This would stop her. This would not allow her to go forward, and Drew couldn't have that. She had to let it go. Breaking the silence, Dean asked, Girl, you okay? Drew held her stare. She stated, I'm fine. I'm gonna be just fine. Thank you for your words of encouragement, Dean. They are so appreciated. But I'm gonna be fine, girl. Dean handed Drew a grateful smile of understanding. Drew returned the smile, proclaiming to Dean it was time to let it all go and be happy. Who knows? Maybe one day I'll hear Joy's side of the story. Until then, I'm just gonna live my best life. Drew then stood to her feet with a new outlook on life. She dusted herself off as if she'd been rolling in dirt. Afterwards, she lifted her chin, stuck her chest out, and stated, I would not allow this hurt to succeed. Marching around the boutique on repeat, she stated, I would not allow this hurt to succeed. She repeated, I would not allow this hurt to succeed. Dean joined in the chanting just as loud. She stated, we will not allow this hurt to succeed. The ladies were wrapped in the moment. Dean looked over at Drew and smiled. Now this is the Drew I know, she stated with gratitude. See, the encouragement is real over there at Saddle Girls, huh? For real, for real. On the real, my shop therapy used to be at Factory Connection in Corsicana. The manager, Regina, she always had something good to tell me. If not that, she always had that fit together. Shout out to Regina, the encouragement was always real. Anyways, the ladies continued their conversation while Drew shopped. The pair were having a good time. Such a good time, they didn't notice a customer standing outside the door. The lady gently tapped the storefront's window and asked, "Darling, are you open?" This summons Dean's attention. "Oh my gosh, yes, we're open." She hurried over to let the lady in. Dean had forgotten she flipped the open sign to close. "I'm so sorry," she greeted the woman with a smile and an apology. The lady entered the store, glanced over at Drew, threw her a wink, then proceeded to the shoe section. Drew was involved. This was the same lady she'd seen in the boutique before. The same lady with that luring essence that gave Drew the need to know who she was. Drew pulled Dean to the side and whispered, "Do you know her? Who is that lady?" Dean gave the woman a once-over. She told Drew she didn't know her personally. She'd been in the shop a few times, but she was mostly an in-and-out shopper, not saying much. Drew eyed the lady, and for some strange reason, the pier kept coming up. If y'all can remember, the lady at the pier, the one who gave Gabe the pinwheel, the one my tape was all worked up about, okay, yeah, that's who came to mind. But Drew wasn't sure. She just still was not sure. She thought about asking Jay, but she knew Jay wouldn't remember. That had been months ago. Once again, Drew has questions, and so do we. Who is this woman, and why is Drew so captivated by her? Finding out is a must. So it's a must you all chime back in with me, right? Chapter 23, Storytime loading. And it will deliver more than your imaginations could ever imagine. Until next time, my earlenders, keep this in mind. Yah transfers pain into prayer, prayer into purpose, and purpose into power. Trust Him always. Yah bless this reading and yourselves. Smooches.